Hi, this episode is a rebroadcast of our story about how cooking made us human. Keep listening after the credits for a brand new Being Human segment about how hard it can be to figure out what we should be eating today. This is Origin Stories, the Leakey Foundation podcast. I'm Meredith Johnson. We modern humans have evolved in ways that are clearly different from the other living great apes. We have these big, complex brains, small teeth and jaws, and much smaller guts. Some evolutionary biologists think the key to these differences might be found in something that we all do every day. Reporter Brianna Breen takes a look at the origins of cooking.
Mr. Theo, did you have a good nap? Did you? I know it's almost time for you to eat.
This is Rachel Carmody and her son, Theo. Rachel spends a lot of time thinking about food, but not in the way you and I probably do.
What? Are you hungry? I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at UCSF in microbiology, but I'm also a visiting fellow in the Department of Human Evolutionary Biology at Harvard. Aww. I think you're making sad sounds because you're hungry. This is my son, Theo. He is 12 weeks old, and he will be weaned onto cooked food because of all the benefits that it provides in terms of softening the food and being easily digestible. But right now, you don't have any teeth at all, so you're just getting breast milk. He's fussy because he's hungry.
Can you tell me what you had for breakfast?
I had bacon and coffee, and that's it. With a newborn, you don't get a lot of time to make a complex breakfast. Nutritionally, it's probably not the best choice, but it tastes so good.
Rachel looks at how nutrition relates to human evolution. The reason she's focused on this area is because of one person.
My name is Richard Wrangham. I'm a professor of biological anthropology at Harvard University, and I wrote a book called Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human.
Richard was Rachel's advisor at Harvard, and they've worked together on a lot of projects. They're interested in cooking because the change from a raw food diet to one that included cooked food probably impacted every part of our ancient relatives' lives.
As soon as it was possible for our ancestors to be able to eat their food cooked on a regular basis, what that meant was those individuals born with slightly smaller teeth and smaller mouths and smaller guts would be the ones that used their food even more efficiently, and as a result, they would be the ones that survived better, had more babies. In other words, the ones that were favored by the process of evolution.
And it turns out that humans aren't the only species that appreciate the difference. Researchers at Harvard found that chimps, when given a piece of food that's raw, will actually hand it back to a researcher and wait to have it cooked.
And if you have ever seen a chimpanzee behave, you know that waiting to eat is not something that comes easily for them. So the fact that they will withhold consuming an item, give it up, actually, and the chimpanzee will make this exchange willingly, suggests that not only do they appreciate that the cooked item is better, but they will ascribe a value to it, a deferred benefit.
All animals, when given the choice, show a clear preference for food that's been cooked. Cats, dogs, even insects.
So if you are rearing caterpillars, if for some reason you want to get as much productivity out of your cockroaches as possible, then it's better to feed them cooked food than raw food.
But back to humans. We have some very specific adaptations that, according to Richard and Rachel, seem to have come directly from this change in diet.
So 2 million years ago, body size gets larger, brain size gets larger. But interestingly, we also had adaptations that suggest that we were able to chew less well. If we think back to our closest living relatives and look at chimpanzees spend an enormous amount of time every day just chewing. Forget about even procuring the food. There's a lot of time invested in that. But just looking at the amount of time it takes them to break down the foods, it's been estimated that they chew 4 to 6 hours per day.
Humans today chew food for less than 1 hour. And looking back to those physical changes from 2 million years ago, when our jaws, teeth, and GI system all got smaller, we wouldn't have been able to eat as much raw food. Earlier species would have been way better equipped for a raw food diet. In the 1990s, Richard was teaching at Harvard. He was trying to figure out what could have caused this set of adaptations to happen all at once. He realized he might have a piece to this puzzle in his own history.
I started thinking about how possible would it be for any human to live on raw food anywhere in the wild. And the reason I did so was because of an experience many years ago when, for some days at a time, while following chimpanzees throughout Gombe National Park and studying their feeding behavior, I tried to feed like a chimpanzee.
This was the early 1970s. Richard was a research student at Gombe National Park in Tanzania with Jane Goodall.
This began when I simply forgot to pack sandwiches or was too late to organize my food supply for the day, and I would simply survive all day on the chimp foods. I did go to Jane Goodall at one point and say to her that I would like to really do an experiment of seeing how, like a chimpanzee, a human could live their life and survive. And what I suggested was that for days at a time, I would eat the chimpanzee diet and live like them, so go naked in the forest like them. And Jane said, well, okay, you can do this, except you've got to wear a loincloth. And I said, well, if you're not going to take the idea seriously, then I'm giving up.
Okay, so hold on. Did you actually go out completely naked for a time period?
No, I never did.
Okay.
It was kind of a joke at the time, but if Jane had said yes, I would have felt obliged to try it.
Got it. But Richard didn't give up on trying a chimp diet. He took it very seriously. He ate everything they ate, the leaves, stems, and fruits from trees, as well as the occasional monkey. Rachel Carmody again.
I've known him long enough to know that he's willing to try anything in the name of science. I believe he even tried to eat ants the way that chimpanzees do by fishing them out of their ant nest. And of course, he ended up with bites all over his face, and it generally concluded that humans were not meant to eat a chimpanzee diet.
The experiment didn't go so well.
There is hardly any food that they eat that you can fill your stomach with. You get incredibly hungry. It's simply impossible.
But was Richard just not used to this diet? Could other humans do better on a raw food diet?
So humans today can, in theory, survive on raw food, but they don't thrive. And we know this because a study was done in Germany of 572 raw foodists, and these are people who had followed a raw food diet for a period of at least 3 years. And what these researchers found is that body mass index decreased with the amount of time someone had been a raw foodist. But importantly, what the researchers found was that 50% of women of reproductive age were not undergoing ovarian cycling. They were not reproductive if they were following a 100% raw food diet. So yes, people can survive on a raw food diet, but they cannot thrive. And as a human evolutionary biologist, when you are so energy limited as to impair reproduction, that is not a sustainable strategy.
If 50% of early human females hadn't been able to reproduce, we wouldn't be here today. So who's the ancestor we need to thank for cooked food?
Yeah, I read the fossil record as saying that Homo erectus was the first species that was adapted to cooking.
Homo erectus lived about 1.5 million years before the first modern humans.
It really needed cooked food. And the reason for saying that is that they were the first species that had relatively small teeth and small guts. And if that is right, then the first species that sat around a fire and started learning to cook would be the predecessor,
A species called Homo habilis.
So that intermediate, in my view, would have been the one that started using fire, and then eventually it got to the point where they discovered that fire was so valuable for cooking food, and they were able to cook their food so regularly that they became adapted to cooked food.
But these ancestors probably didn't go straight from eating raw foods in their original forms to grilling over an open fire.
I think the first step in that transition might have been to use very simple tools, a hammerstone, for example, or a slicing tool. But the big benefits are not going to come until ancestral hominins began to apply heat to the food.
When food is cooked, you immediately get more energy, more calories.
And there are two reasons for that. One is that what cooking does is to increase the proportion of the nutrient that actually gets digested in the small intestine. The second reason is that if you cook the food gets digested more quickly and it demands less of the body.
But to begin cooking, someone had to be the first to experiment with putting food in a fire and to eat that very first warm, charred piece of food.
I think probably what occurred is that ancestral humans came upon foods that had been cooked naturally by bushfires or by volcanic activity or by lightning strikes. And these ancestral humans, as they walked through the savannah and encountered something that had been cooked naturally, might have ate it and enjoyed it and benefited from it. They realized they could walk further that day, or if they encountered these foods regularly, they could produce more babies than they had in the past.
Richard and Rachel see other clues that our species probably had control of fire from very early on.
When we emerged as the first Homo erectus, then we could no longer climb nearly as well in trees as we had before. And what that means is that they almost certainly slept on the ground.
And having access to fire would have given them a way to keep safe from predators while they slept. But archaeological proof of fire, and especially proof human ancestors had control of fire, has been hard to find.
We remain very puzzled by the fact that you will find archaeological sites, even as recently as 40,000 years ago, that have no trace of fire and for which the archaeologists involved say, look, we've looked so carefully here that we think these people were living without fire.
We've got pretty strong evidence of the control of fire going back 1 million years ago, and this goes to Wondervert Cave in South Africa, where we see deep in a cave evidence of controlled fires happening over a period of time that can't be explained by environmental disturbance because they are so deep in the cave. We can't say for certain whether the burned bones that were found were burned for the purpose of cooking, or perhaps they were burned as fuel.
But in that cave, our ancestors were able to use fire when and how they wanted. And even without lots of evidence of ancient fires, there's still many other signs of the influence cooking had on us.
The process of developing into Homo sapiens clearly depended on having a big brain, and so much of what we do is dependent on our intelligence. Something like a quarter of the food we eat goes to simply fuel our brain. It's only possible if we have a rate of food supply that is made possible by cooked food.
Thanks to those early ancestors that learned to cook, today we have larger brains and unlimited options for what and how we eat. We've also added an infinite number of techniques for producing and preparing foods.
Fundamentally, the foods that we see in a supermarket today bear quite little resemblance to their ancestors. We've made fruits sweeter. We've reduced their tannins and their bitter qualities. We've made them easier to peel. We've made them brighter in color. And this has changed the nutritional value of these items.
And what we need in our diet today might also be evolving.
Good morning.
The BBC tried out its own experiment, similar to Richard Wrangham's chimp diet.
Good night's sleep.
Well, quite noisy. Some strange sounds during the night, but apart from that, yeah, fine. Not bad at all.
You can hear the baboons going and the birds going and something roaring down there.
A group of British volunteers lived in a zoo for 12 days and ate what they called an evolutionary diet. They stayed in tents next to the zoo's primate area and ate a raw diet made of vegetables, fruits, nuts, and honey.
Yes. Oh, we've got delicious food for you today.
John is still struggling with the vegetables.
Have you ever eaten a piece of cauliflower
Never.
before? So this is your
This is
cauliflower.
my very first time.
Go on then.
And I'm actually, my hand's shaking.
Go on, John, you can do it.
Don't smell it, just eat it.
Nice. Get on with it, you wuss.
Don't do it, it's bad.
When they started the program, the participants were all overweight and on the verge of developing serious health problems. At the end of their stay, the zoo's temporary residents emerged with a dramatic drop in cholesterol. Their blood pressure was lower, and they all lost a significant amount of weight. Most of us probably don't want to try living in a zoo or experimenting with a chimp diet ourselves. But today, the modern highly processed diet is one that humans around the world aren't doing great on. Examining what our ancestors ate and why they ate it could help us make better choices for the future.
It's really only been in the last 100 years where we have the problem of excess calories. This is not a problem that exists for most species, and it's certainly not a problem that existed for us back in human evolution. I mean, the problem then was always getting enough. And so now when we think about human health and a raw food diet, some people could reasonably expect health benefits because they're starting out in an obese diabetic state where it actually benefits them to extract fewer calories out of the diet.
If the important thing is to get as much energy as possible, which is the way that animals in general are responding to their opportunities, then cooked food is always going to be best. But if for some reason you are short of vitamins, then it is better to eat your food raw, because the process of cooking tends to reduce the concentration of vitamins by somewhere from 25 to 75% sometimes. And of course, the other thing is that if you actually want to lose weight, then it's better to eat your food raw, because you will get less energy.
Back at Rachel's, Theo doesn't realize it yet, but he's already benefiting from cooked food.
Are you almost ready for lunch?
Are you having bacon?
You're getting bacon indirectly because Mommy ate bacon. Yes, you are. I bet the milk is going to taste like bacon. Oh, Mom, bacon is good.
For Origin Stories, I'm Brianna Breen.
Yes, on bacon.
Thanks to Richard Wrangham, Rachel Carmody, and baby Theo. We'll have links to more information about Richard Wrangham and Rachel Carmody's work in the show notes, along with a link to Richard Wrangham's book, How Cooking Made Us Human. Today's episode was produced by Brianna Breen. Our editor is Audrey Quinn. Music and scoring by Henry Nagel. Support for this episode comes from the Being Human initiative of the Leakey Foundation and the Baumann Foundation, dedicated to understanding modern life from an evolutionary perspective. The Being Human initiative is all about why we experience our lives the way we do, including our thoughts, feelings, behavior, and our health. And so, we're bringing you the Being Human bonus segment, where we talk about how the science in this episode applies to modern life.
People are very confused about what to eat these days, and overall, they're not feeling very well.
That's Lily Mazzarella. Lily is a clinical herbalist and a board-certified nutrition specialist. She owns an apothecary called Farmacopia in Santa Rosa, California. She spends her days seeing clients who need help figuring out what they should be eating.
They want to know what to eat to feel good. They want to know what they should be eating. That's probably the biggest question, or the most common question I get: what should I be eating? And of course, people are surprised to hear that the answer varies depending on who they are and what their health concerns are.
Lily's clients come to her with all kinds of health concerns. Some people need help losing weight. Some are suffering from digestive problems like irritable bowel syndrome and Crohn's disease. And some just need help because the food they're eating makes them feel terrible.
So one of the most interesting things is I think we can argue a lot about what our ancestors ate. And, there's all this controversy now about what a quote unquote paleo diet is or was. But what's really clear to me is that we are not adapted for our current standard American diet.
Lily says one of the biggest clues that our bodies aren't adapted to today's diet of excess sugar and processed foods is the fact that we have multiple hormones that help raise the level of blood sugars in our body, but only one, insulin, that helps lower it.
So in the standard American diet, we're getting a lot of our energy intake, so our kilocalories, from simple sugars and from poor quality fats. And so if you think about what that means, like evolutionarily, we might be really well adapted to handle getting some kind of windfall. Like, so we come across a cache of honey a few times in a season and we're able to take that in and use that as energy, but also kind of pack it away for a rainy day, which is what insulin does for us. But now that we're foraging in our kitchens and in supermarkets, and we can come across on any given night a pint of ice cream or cookies, bread, you name it. So that means that in the presence of lots of sugars and a really sedentary lifestyle, that we have all of these diseases of modernity, like obesity, abdominal obesity, and diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, certain cancers.
Our ancestors had different problems.
They were spending so much time just trying to get their energy requirements met. Like Richard Wrangham was talking about that. Like he ate all day but couldn't get full and couldn't get enough calories. And obviously the chimps were more adapted to their diet than we are. But the fact that there's just so much available to us now is a little, I think, confusing for our bodies.
And there is so much confusing information about what makes a healthy diet, even whether we should be eating our food cooked or raw.
Yeah, so the raw food part, as you can imagine, people have a lot of assumptions about what a healthy diet is. And like, for example, most people think that I'm a vegetarian, which I'm not, or a vegan, which I'm obviously not, or that I eat a lot of raw food, which I actually don't. So people have an assumption that a raw food diet is healthier. So it was great kind of hearing some of the science behind this. And I actually wasn't aware of that German raw foodist study, which I looked up and is really interesting.
Remember the study of the German raw foodists that Rachel Carmody mentioned in our story?
There were some interesting findings in terms of reversing certain markers of cardiovascular disease and weight loss, which Rachel Carmody pointed to. But this idea that 50% of the women who were eating raw food diets were not having ovarian cycling is really, really notable. That means that there's sort of not enough left over to devote to reproduction. So reproduction is one of the things that sort of gets the shaft if our bodies are under stress or not well nourished enough. And that makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. So I've been able to talk to some of my clients about that, which is really great. And then also, I mentioned that I see these people for all of their digestive conditions like IBS and reflux and Crohn's disease, and they do terribly with raw foods.
So Lily says there are interventional diets that are temporary and can help people who are healing from conditions like IBS and obesity.
And then there are sort of sustaining and sustainable diets. So they pointed to that in the podcast, right? So when that group of people went to live in the British Zoo, which was hilarious, they went in there with borderline of some serious health conditions, I'm assuming, borderline diabetes, or they were all overweight. And they saw an improvement, eating that raw food sort of semi-chimp diet. And so the idea that a diet can be supportive or appropriate for a period of time and then not, or once you achieve your health goals, you may want to switch to something that you can obtain more nutrition from. But the IBS piece, people are on a fully cooked foods diet. So when I'm working on gut healing with people, and that's a big part of what I do, cooked foods are absolutely essential. There's really no raw food present in the gut healing portion of their diet. So that may be something that they're able to return to. I have a history of really serious gastrointestinal issues and distress. And there was a time when I couldn't eat any raw foods at all, and my food became very restricted. And now I can when I want to, and that feels great. And that is one of the things too that from the episode that really stuck with me was that, how much energy we put towards digestion. And if it's raw food, that there's even more energy going into there. If we're chewing 4 hours a day, that's even more energy. And so the idea that cooked foods kind of freed up mental real estate, for things like the development of language and maybe expressive arts and things like that, cooked foods, there's that kind of gut-brain connection, and that cooked foods might have kind of tipped us more in that direction of being human.
Thank you so much for doing this and talking to me about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I love origin stories.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for listening to Origin Stories and to the Being Human segment, sponsored by the Being Human Initiative. Origin Stories is a project of the Leakey Foundation. Since 1968, the Leakey Foundation has been funding human origins research and outreach. You can help support this show and the science we talk about with a tax-deductible donation to the Leakey Foundation. For a limited time, your donation will be doubled by an anonymous sponsor. Learn more and help support science at leakeyfoundation.org. That's LEAKEY foundation.org. Transcripts are provided by Adept Word Management, Intelligent Transcripts. They can help you with all of your transcription needs at adeptwordmanagement.com. Thanks for listening.